Hello everyone, I am not a government drone, and believe it or not, I just released a VR game into early access. Yes, you actually heard that right. As the final for my VR class I was taking in college, me and my friend Brady had to release a game to Steam. This is the story of how that went down.
Alright, class. I need all of you to make a VR game. Go.
Alright, we need ideas. I got a few, but I'm not too sure how I feel about any of them. What about you?
What if we make a game where you swim away from sharks or something?
Shark?
Yo ho ho.
Shiver me timbers.
I am terrible scabby. Please send help.
You got any squirting me?
Wait, what if we make a game where you play as a steampunk pirate who has to fight increasingly difficult waves of fish so that you can prove yourself worthy to be the next captain?
And that's how I came up with the idea for Epic Steampunk Pirate Coming of Age Ceremony of Doom. Yeah, that's actually what we called the game. So, let's get into what I've actually done so far. First things first, I actually had to learn how to use VR. I followed a great tutorial series by Valem. This taught me the basics of VR development and was quite helpful. Next, I sat down in Blender for a bit and threw together this temporary arena that I could use to test gameplay. It will hopefully be replaced later with a much better looking one, but for now, it'll do nicely. Now, in order for the player to move around the map, we thought it would be fun to actually swim around. This great tutorial by Justin P. Barnett was precisely what I needed. I will link it in the description for anyone who wants to give it a go. It was very well made. Essentially, when the player hits the grip buttons, it'll add the velocities of the controllers together and push the player in the opposite direction. When the player is moving, they'll have a force applied in the opposite direction to them in order to decelerate to 0 to simulate the friction of the water. Very cool. Now, before I started adding weapons, I knew I was going to need something to fight, so I started playing around with Unity's nav mesh system to get some basic fish enemies. Of course, fish don't simply walk around on the ground, so I had to find a way to allow them to swim up and down. This provided a bit of a unique challenge. For now, I opted to use a bit of geometry to calculate what the base offset of the nav mesh should be. This is computed by taking the target's height and subtracting the height of the fish from the ground, which is its Y position minus the base offset. We then tell the base offset to use a smooth damp function to approach the desired value over time. I also added a random offset value that changes every once in a while so that the movement of the fish is a bit more varied. This unfortunately is a bit of a patchwork solution for now, since it is not truly 3D pathfinding. I may make this system more advanced in the future, but it may not end up being a problem considering the map shouldn't have too many pathfinding obstacles at all. The next episode in this series will probably heavily focus on enemy behavior. Now the fun part. When you think about it, swimming is exhausting. Waving your arms around like a lunatic to escape hordes of fish feels like it would get old real quick. Of course, there is one natural solution to this. We obviously need a grappling hook. My thought for this is to add a harpoon gun as a multi-purpose utility. In one mode, it grapples onto level geometry and pulls the player towards it. In the other, it can impale smaller fish and pull them towards you. The purpose of that second one? I'll get into that in a bit. There are a few hiccups when implementing this though. Namely, my first attempt had the code get so spaghettified and convoluted that it became a pain to work on. After about a day and a half of that, I found my solution. Now, let me tell you, state fix everything. Complicated programming behaviors, your car, your marriage, you name it. Let me break down how I implemented this. For the gun, I added it in 4 states: idle, firing, grappling, and returning. While in idle, you can activate the weapon or swap its fire mode. If you fire the weapon, it will go into the firing state, in which the harpoon travels in a straight line. If it hits a valid target, it will choose either to enter the grappling state or the returning state, depending on the fire mode. Of course, if it misses or hits an invalid target, or the player releases the trigger, it'll enter the returning state. In the grappling state, it'll accelerate the player towards the harpoon, and when it gets close enough, it'll enter its returning state, and then idle once in range of the gun. All of this is just for me to say that I can do this now.
I'm Batman.
This thing is way too fun. Seriously, I'll enter play mode in to test some random feature and then end up flinging myself around the map for 5 minutes instead. Oh yeah, I also added this cutlass, that you can swing at the enemies to do damage. Its damage scales with your speed, which is also very nice. There's also these nice particle effects that look like clouds of blood for the fun of it. I then wanted to add in a proper health system. Both the fish and the player inherit from a health interface that I made for some glorious This way, the player and the fish can use roughly the same methods to handle damage. I then added in a health bar. It has a nice Dark Souls style dampening, as well as an overheal feature that drains over time. Of course, in order to overheal, the player needs a way to heal in the first place. And that's where the fish harpooning comes in. When the player harpoons a fish, the player can hold it up to their mouth and will start eating it. This will not only damage the fish at regular interval, but it'll also heal the player. I felt this was an adequately brutal feature. Just ignore the fact that you'll probably be wearing a scuba mask canonically. With this in place, I realized that just a cutlass wasn't going to cut it. I knew that more weapons were needed. So naturally, the next weapon I added to my Pirates-themed game was a machine gun. You know, pirates, machine guns. Heck yeah. For this, I simply shoot a raycast from the fire point of the gun at a regular interval. I did do the classic trope of having the weapon overheating after enough time, meaning that the player will have to be careful how much they fire it. I think it would be fun to give the player the option to upgrade it later. Also, as we can see, we got a nice model for the piranhas. Of course, the player won't be able to use any of these fun weapons if they don't have a way to switch between them. Since there isn't really a way to use the scroll wheel or number keys in VR, such as how weapon swapping is done in a lot of shooters, I thought it'd be fun to use a nice radial menu. I found this great tutorial, once again by Valem, that walked me through the basics of it. I did change the way the input works, however. By using the right stick, the player can open the radio menu and hover over the weapon of choice. I know there's no graphic to indicate which weapon is being selected, but trust me, that'll get added. This ended up taking a lot more trigonometry than I expected, but I am happy I managed to get this to work nicely. I'll link the tutorial in the description. The last thing I wanted to touch on are the graphics. You may have noticed a few things throughout this video stylistically. Our goal for the game is to do some vaguely PS1 low poly graphics, mostly to save some time on modeling, and as a result I mess around with some pixelation and vertex warping shaders. Once again, I followed a few great tutorials for these simply just because I'm not too well versed in shader graph, and we got the start of some cool graphics. The pixelation, of course, might have to be removed later depending on the style we go on for later parts of the game, but we may be able to keep it if everything stays adequately readable. The vertex warping is pretty cool by making this old school jittery look on the model's geometry. For those of you who are unfamiliar, old consoles calculated vertex positions with integer values, so vertexes ended up having to snap to different coordinates on a grid. In modern engines, this is not a problem because coordinates can be stored as floats, meaning that movement can look significantly smoother. My teammate Brady also got a few models started for the fish enemies, such as this piranha, this squid, and even this turtle, as well as some textures. I'm really excited to get these things implemented into the game. Well, that's it for this episode. Next time I plan to work on a lot of the fish enemy behaviors, art implementation, and even some weapon variety, so stay tuned for that. On one last note, this was my first video in this style, so I'm still getting it all figured out. I'm hoping to do more of this stuff over the summer without being overwhelmed by school and work, and have a lot of fun plans for that. I would love to hear any feedback, because I am sure there are a million things I could have done better here. Anyways, that's all I have for today, so I'll see you in the next one.